Okay, this is Dr. Tanya Kafer with the second installment in a series of videos outlining the research process as I go through a project that I'm working on. So we're going to do the research project from beginning to end, as you saw in installment 1. Today we're going to just be looking at some background to the project. So last time we talked about the background to the video series. Today we're talking about the specific project we're going to do and some background on that. And some of you are, probably a lot of you actually, are not necessarily going to be interested in this topic. You're not going to really want to hear about this background. It's going to seem like a waste of time. And that's okay. The point here isn't the specific project, right? The point is the process that I'm going through. But as we go on, in order to understand the process and why I'm making certain choices, you have to understand some of the background. Generally speaking, I'm interested in how young children learn. When I say young children, I mean around kindergarten or preschool age. So how do they learn things? How do they learn pieces of information? So the first step to that is explaining what I mean by learn and what I mean by things. Things is the easiest. Things is just there's any given fact or piece of information that we want children to know. For example, let's say we want them to know that birds lay eggs. Now that's an interesting fact because it's sort of a lie. We know that 50% of birds don't lay eggs, actually. Only female birds lay eggs. But when we really want kids to get from a fact like birds lay eggs is birds reproduce by a system where the eggs are laid before the young are born, as opposed to live births. So that's a real piece of information. It's related to our overall conceptualization of birds and eggs and reproduction. So it's a thing. That's a thing that can be learned. That's a piece of information that we would want kids to have. When I say learn, I'm talking really about a two-step process. The first step is remembering a thing, remembering that birds lay eggs. Step 2 is that you recall and apply that memory to new situations. So it's not enough to know that this particular bird lays an egg. We have to know that all birds lay eggs, or all female birds lay eggs anyway. You want to be able to apply it to a new situation. So when they see a bird out in the wild, they'll expect that it would lay eggs, or when they see a nest, they would expect to find eggs in it, something like that. So when you can bring a piece of information to bear in a new situation or a new context, we call that learning, essentially. So the first part is just memory, and the second part is called knowledge transfer, and together they are learning. So the trick here in my research is that facts are actually pretty complicated to learn. A lot of people think that kids will basically believe whatever you tell them, but that's not really true. Kids are actually pretty sophisticated or meticulous in what they're going to learn and why. So different factors can affect that learning. So for example, children are much more likely to learn from someone they trust and see as knowledgeable about a topic. They're more likely to learn from someone if they see certain pedagogical cues coming from them. They're more likely to learn if people say things with confidence, etc. A whole slew of things like that. So that's all really interesting, but it's specifically related to how kids learn from people, and more education is getting away from learning from people, or getting away from the situation where a teacher tells you a fact and the kid is expected to remember it. We're more moving towards, especially in kindergarten and preschool, a model of discovery learning in which kids investigate and discover things for themselves, which is great, but it doesn't actually cover everything that we expect kids to know. There are some things you can't observe by discovery. For example, things like dinosaurs. We can't go back in time and see dinosaurs in the wild. There's no field trip to Jurassic Park. That's a real thing. You can't, have them understand the concept of refugees by, forcing them to flee from their homes with only the clothes on their back. There are just some things that, for ethical reasons or practical reasons or reasons of abstraction, we just can't have kids learn through discovery. So for those things, we rely on a system that I call knowledge building supports. So those are things like books, pictures, videos, interactive apps, computers, simulations, the internet, etc. Anything like that. And when you ask teachers, these are the things that they say are their main source of conveying content knowledge. And for kindergarten, number 1 with a bullet is classroom read-alouds. Books are where teachers expect kids to learn things from. Now, there's a lot of information available on classroom read-alouds and how to make them better and what factors can influence whether kids learn from them, basically how you can maximize their effectiveness. And it's usually things like asking questions, activating background knowledge, engaging the students before and after. And they're all very important things that I'm not going to get into here. The relevant bit is that almost all of this research is, again, about the human interaction there. It's about how people learn from the interaction around the book. Whereas what I want to look at is how people learn from the book itself, how the book can help children learn. So in particular, what I'm interested in is how the overall structure or genre of the book may impact learning content. Now, when I say genre, you might be thinking of like a horror movie, and that's not far off. There are a lot of different genres for all kinds of mediums, and each genre has its own set of rules or conventions. There are narrow genres like horror or sci-fi or whatever, but there are also big, broad genres. And some of the broadest are what are called storybook versus information book. Storybooks are probably what you think about when you think about children's books. They're the traditional stories that involve characters, plot, conflict resolution, and this is by far and away the most common type of book that children encounter. Because storybooks are what are most common, what students see the most often, that means that they're the most familiar to students. And we know that things that are more familiar, when you're familiar with the structure of something, it's easier to learn from it. Information books are less common, but you've definitely seen them too. Their main goal is to convey information. They don't really have a plot or characters per se. What they have is facts. Their goal is to communicate information. And in that regard, that means that they include a lot of pedagogical cues. So things like timeless verb structure and general noun structure. And there is evidence that those kinds of things can help kids learn from books or can help kids learn individual things. And then there's a third type. There are a lot of different types, but for now, there's only one more that we're talking about. And that's a hybrid of information and storybooks. And these are incredibly popular. You've definitely seen these too. You see them a lot on TV in particular in that medium. So things like The Magic School Bus and Go Diego Go and Dora the Explorer. Those are all things that are really trying to combine the narrative and the informational. So there'll be an overarching story, and within that overarching story, there is some information provided. So, for example, you might have a narrative about someone meeting a turtle and learning all about turtles because they've met this turtle. So it includes narrative information and fantastical information because you don't really meet and become friends with turtles the way you do in real life. That's not a thing. But it gives them this idea of how you learn about turtles is through this conversation with a turtle. So it's really trying to combine these two elements. Okay, so what does that mean for our study? Well, essentially all the things we know make different predictions about which kind of book is going to be most successful for children to learn new things. So the only solution then is to go ahead and test which type of book kids learn more from. If the most important thing is pedagogical context, then we'd expect information books to be the easiest to learn from. If familiarity is more important than pedagogical context, then we'd expect storybooks to be the thing that kids learned best from. And if hybrid books are best at combining familiarity of a storybook with the pedagogical cues of an information book, then maybe that would be the best way to learn. So we don't really know. The only way is to go ahead and test. So that's what we're doing now. That's the goal of this study, is to test that. That's the background of the study, and in the next step, we'll talk about how we're going to design and implement it.